everybody, this is Elisa. Welcome back. We're going through the endocrine system, and this is part three, the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And this is like part one of that. So it's like multi parts. So the hypothalamus itself is a particular endocrine organ. And what it's going to be doing is it's going to regulate like a ton of these functions that are super essential for survival. Things like whether or not you're retaining water or like losing water, thermoregulation, body temperature, sex drive, childbirth, like all of these like incredibly important primary foundational functions. So it's shaped like a flattened funnel, and it's actually deeply embedded into the brain. And the other thing is, it's like the hypothalamus actually kind of controls another gland that's right next door called the pituitary gland, and we'll see that in a minute. So the pituitary gland is actually suspended from the hypothalamus by like this little dangly bulb stalk, and we call it the infundibulum, right? But it's like just kind of what it there. So it's housed up in the sphenoid bone, so it's like one of the internal bones of the skull. And the sella turcica itself it refers to like the Turkish seat, is what it looks like an Ottoman seat of the sphenoid bone. And it's like not big. It's like the size of a biggish bean, like a kidney bean, right? And it's composed again of these two structures. And it's kind of interesting because these two structures that are now kind of fused together to make the pituitary gland actually have different origins as well as different functions, right? There's the one that's up in front, and so that's the anterior pituitary, and there's the one that's in the back. So the one that's up in front, or the anterior pituitary, is referred to as the adenohypophysis, and the pituitary gland component that's on the back side of the posterior is known as the neurohypophysis. And like here's what it looks like as it's developing in the brain, right? So as you can see, this is very, very, very early on in embryonic development. But if you look at the bottom two circles, you'll see one has like this tiny, like kind of a reddish circle pouch that's developing. And then up from like the neurotube is going to be this dip, right? And so that's the little bulb that's from the posterior lobe. Eventually they come together and make the pituitary focus with the anterior and the posterior. So it's kind of just like an interesting thing, the way that they develop. So as far as anatomy, the anterior pituitary, right, the adenohypophysis, constitutes the anterior 3/4, not small, of the pituitary gland itself. It's linked directly to the hypothalamus by a hypophyseal portal system. And what that means is we have things like capillaries in the hypothalamus that are going to be connected to other, like smaller secondary capillaries in the adenohypophysis, and specifically by portal venules, right? And venules are going to be like smaller veins, right? The hypothalamic hormones are going to kind of turn on and turn off, basically regulate these adenohypophysis cells, right? Tell them what to do. And the hypothalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones, right? Those are the on and off switches, are going to travel in the hypophyseal portal system from the hypothalamus all the way to the anterior, right, the front part, pituitary. And so there's going to be different hormones that are actually secreted there. Like the anterior pituitary gland is going to secrete different hormones than, say, the posterior. So just kind of an important thing to keep that division in mind, and that the hypothalamus is going to control if which lobe is going to secrete what. Okay, here it is again, right? So imagine we're inside the brain, and this is a hypothalamus up here, and this is the anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary, right? And I want you to take a look just really quick at the vascularization here. So you'll notice there's like this purple webbing that is going to be centered inside of the anterior pituitary. So those are referred to as the portal venules, right? And so remember, that's a vein, it's a very, very tiny vein. And so if you look up at the top, we have the neuron cell body. And so those are going to be part of the signal messaging system from the hypothalamus. It's going to tell the pituitary, anterior, or posterior, like, what are you going to secrete and how much of it, right? So some of the things that they are going to be responding to are hypothalamic hormones, right? So gonadotrophin releasing hormone, um, thyrotrophin, corticotrophin, prolactin, of course, growth hormone, and somatostatin, right? So we'll talk about some of those later on. But just to kind of get you an idea, those are hormones that regulate a lot of other hormones to be released and a lot of other processes in the body to start, right? So they're kind of like master switches. So moving down at the anterior lobe hormones. So these are going to be things that also act, say, in the gonads, like follicle stimulating hormone, which we'll learn about a little bit later, is important for releasing and maturing eggs, as well as luteinizing hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, which is pretty important for quite a few functions throughout the body, including metabolism and other basic fundamental regulatory functions, adrenocorticotropic hormone, prolactin, and growth hormone as well. So the pituitary, also known as the neurohypophysis, what is that? Constitutes the last 1/4 of the pituitary gland. So it's like not big. And the thing is, this is like not actually a, a gland technically. I mean, it is part of the pituitary gland, but it itself is mainly just nerve tissue. And basically, all of these little nerve cell bodies in the hypothalamus are going to like extend an arm all the way down to the down the stalk, which is the hypophyseal tract, right? And so that's going to end right there in that posterior lobe. And so you're going to have a lot of that nervous tissue right there. The hypothalamic neurons are going to secrete hormones that are stored in the neurohypophysis until they're actually ready and in dense enough aggregation to be released out into the blood and perform that like body-wide communication. Okay. Sorry. All right, so that looks like it's it for the start of hypothalamus and pituitary. I'm going to continue on a little bit more in the next video, but I think that's just like a nice, tidy stop point right there for you. Okay, so I hope you're out there somewhere having a wonderful day. Bye-bye.